welcome to this episode. We're going to start something new. I have a friend with me, Michele Francesca Cohen. Michele, why don't you say hello to everybody and tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you do.
Hey everyone, thanks Aaron for having me on. I am an associate pastor currently in Trophy Club, Texas, and also a coach and an author of 3 books. And just enjoying the summer right now and all the beautiful sunshine. How are you doing up there in Colorado, Aaron?
Yeah, we've got lots of sunshine, and it's nice to be able to get out, and they're opening things up a little bit more
Good.
for us. So hopefully it'll be good. We'll see. It's a crazy time that we're living in,
Yeah.
But we wanted to just come to you, the viewers, and just share some things about relationships. We kind of want to introduce the idea in this video about toxic relationships or unhealthy relationships, and kind of compare and contrast what is an unhealthy relationship versus what is a healthy relationship. What can you do to recognize if you're in an unhealthy relationship, and maybe more importantly, what you can do about it. And we won't cover all of that, right, Michele, in one episode, but we just kind of want to introduce the topic. So everybody knows, that a abusive relationship where there's physical abuse or where there's a lot of alcoholism or substance abuse, that's kind of on the forefront. Everybody kind of knows about that, even though there are a lot of people that are stuck in those relationships and they don't know how to get out of them. But there are other ways that relationships can become toxic. So what's your ideas on that? What do you think? What are some ways that are subtly toxic that maybe people don't recognize?
That's such a good question. I think it can be very subtle. It can be really anything on the spectrum of where you're not experiencing a valuing of yourself. Could be anything where somebody's not willing to, show interest in your life. They're not asking questions. There's not a good reciprocation of interest. It could be, emotional unavailability that's not really being, brought into the open. Could be some kind of withdrawing activity through woundedness, fight and flight and fawn and all of those kind of things. And these show up, don't they, in our day-to-day relationships. Shunning or any kind of experience where you realize I'm feeling really uncomfortable in this, and in staying in it, I'm not really valuing myself, or allowing this, I'm not valuing myself. And then the question, what to do about that?
Yeah, so we are social emotional creatures, right? And there's no way around that. We have legitimate social and emotional needs. And it's very, very hard to be emotionally healthy if you're not socially healthy. If your relationships are not adding value to your life, you're not adding value to the people in your life, then it's hard to be mentally healthy. A lot of people are depressed for good reason, because they're in a relationship where maybe they're doing all the work and they're not getting anything back. So you talked about the thing that triggered that thought for me was you talked about people who are emotionally unavailable. What do you mean by that?
Well, coming into a relationship or showing up with the idea that they want to have a relationship, but really in the end, closed heart, an inability to share, to give, to open up. I think it sometimes shows up when people incessantly talk about themselves, and it doesn't even occur to them to ask a question towards somebody else or to show interest in somebody else's life. I think it can show up with, just a general unavailability in terms of time or heart-to-heart connection. And there's all kinds of reasons why people become emotionally unavailable. You probably know some of those roots.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a complex issue, but you're bringing up some great stuff that I want to highlight first, because man, what a good point. Somebody that just talks incessantly about themselves and doesn't ask you with genuine interest about your day, or doesn't actively listen when you're talking about your day. Those are the kind of subtle things that I'm talking about, because it leaves the other person in the relationship who's being treated that way, it leaves them feeling very unfulfilled, I would imagine. And also it's kind of the subtle ways that we begin to either devalue ourselves, or it reinforces the way that we don't value ourselves. Because if you're not listening to me, if you're not asking questions about my life, and you forget things that I tell you that are important to me, that is a form of emotional neglect that can lead to a devaluing of the person and their self-image.
Right. You know, hearing you say that, and I had a feeling that you would really hint at the root. I think we stay in, you know, I'm thinking immediately, why do we stay in those
Right.
situations? You know, why, when you know deep down in yourself, this is very unfulfilling. I'm the one that's just constantly asking the questions, or I'm only hearing about you. And when you're done, it's like that's the end of it. Why would we stay in that, or any kind of toxic relationship? And you kind of hinted at it there. Neglect, perhaps a reenactment of neglect in a former relationship, and then the sense of this is all I'm worth. you know, neglect is my lot in life. If I want somebody in my life, I have to accept neglect, and all of those twisted things that go on in our minds that keep us tied to things that really aren't serving us.
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed, kind of a pattern that can happen to people in midlife, and I've seen this a lot with women, especially, where because as men, we are kind of wired maybe in society a little bit differently, in that we're still in that sort of go out and conquer mode. We're thinking about our job, we're thinking about money, we're thinking about those kinds of things. And sometimes the spouse is putting all of the effort into the relationship, planning the dates, making the dinner, trying to engage in conversation, all that stuff. And the husband thinks, man, this relationship has been great. And then something happens in midlife. And I think what happens is the cupboard just gets bare, right? It's like I've been putting all this effort and putting all this work into this relationship, and I'm spent. And then they start wanting something back, and the guys are completely shocked. They're like, we had a perfect marriage, we had a perfect relationship. And what they don't realize was you had a perfect relationship because the other person was doing all the work. And they're tired and they can't keep doing that anymore.
Right. And who wants to be in a situation where nobody is really or that person is not really showing interest in you, you know? And so the question pops up for me, how do you show interest in somebody? We're talking specifically now about emotional unavailability. How does somebody then in who is emotionally unavailable, they kind of know they're emotionally unavailable, it's hard to break out of, isn't it? How do you can't twist it out, the other person can't twist it out of them. How do you have that conversation even? It's
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the keys, one of the difficulties with relationships long term, we're kind of talking long term romantic relationships here. It does take two people to make it work, and there has to be sort of those honest conversations that happen, and without defensiveness. And so one of the other things that happens in these relationships is when you're the one whose needs are not being met, you can sit down with the other person and express your needs. This is what I need from you. And oftentimes the person you're expressing your needs to can become defensive or what have you. And then the next thing you know, they're doing a subtle form of gaslighting you by saying, oh, well, it's your fault, or I'm not really like that, or it's no big deal. And then you feel even more dismissed.
yes. Yeah, it takes a step back, doesn't it, to reevaluate, what are my needs, and is it even okay for me to have needs? I think especially with avoidant or emotionally unavailable type relationships, it's okay for me to share that I have this need, and we do need to talk about this because things are going very stale between us. I'm a fan of Esther Perel. You may know
No.
her work. Oh, fantastic! She's actually a sex therapist and clinician, and has written many books. And when I first saw her speaking, I just lapped up everything she had. But she has this one amazing statement. She said, which is in answer to the question, why do happily married people have affairs? And it's not typically because of the physical side of things. Even it's about the fact that person having the affair can be somebody that they disallowed themselves to be, that they suppressed this person who got wrapped up in domestication and paying bills and the routine of life. And suddenly there's this jumpstart of this thing that brings them alive, and they're able to do that with the other person, where they can't find a way to do that with the person that they're with, their partner or their husband or wife. I just thought that was absolutely incredible, that what we really want is aliveness. And I've been thinking lately, especially with everything going on, I mean, we're all having such a very personal response to the coronavirus, the lockdown, things that are happening in our world are very, very intense. And so we've got to expect that people are changing rapidly, right? And the person that you've been living with for 20 years might have just gone through some massive kind of leap on the inside, changed dramatically, or affected in a dramatic way. And I think it's while we're talking about relationships, I know we started out talking about toxic relationships, and I think it'd be good to finish, those different aspects of that. But it's so important that we remember right now, hey, you might not be living with the same person right now.
Yes, exactly. One of the best descriptions of a relationship that I ever came across in my readings was two people who are willing to grow together, and growth
Yes.
necessitates change. And there are times that, I mean, we do grow. And a lot of relationships, a lot of these toxic relationship structures or systems develop for the express purpose of suppressing growth because we don't like that change, right? Because you're absolutely right. You're living with a different person.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I think that is unfortunate, and we can, I think in one of these episodes it'd be interesting to get into the religious aspects of this, but society is so different now from the society of the Bible. And most people don't even realize, that marriage in the Bible, you didn't stand up and make vows. You were bought. If you were a woman, you were literally bought and it was all about financial security for the family and for the family business and all those different things. And so I think there are different principles that can apply there. Back in the ancient world, a woman that was divorced didn't have options. And I think there are times when there needs to be a healthy separation. If you can't grow together and make it work as you're growing, then you need to either heal it together or you need to leave it together.
Yes.
In a healthy way.
Yeah. It is possible that two people can start out with being one kind of person, each one, and it work, but become so completely different because their careers or their path or their journey. And it's really a beautiful thing, I think, to honor one another in that, can we honor one another's growth and change? And so she says this beautiful statement, which is that most adults have 2 or 3 significant relationships in their lifetime. Some of them have that relationship with the same person.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You know what? I want to bring this up too, because something else that happens in these relationships, you can have a person who's emotionally unavailable. Oftentimes, a person who is emotionally unavailable does not want to grow because growth requires pain and feeling and whatever. You have so you have this person who's doing all this work. They're not getting their needs met from the other person, their social emotional needs. And what often happens in some of these relationships is that the partner can also alienate you from other relationships. Oftentimes these people are very insecure. They're very uncomfortable with relationships themselves, and they project that onto their partner, and they don't want their partner to have the love and support. They want to be everything to that partner, because if they can create that dependency, it really is, consciously or unconsciously, they're creating a dependency upon themselves and upon the relationship. And part of that is to alienate you from friends, alienate you from family. And oftentimes very subtly, nobody's ever going to say, you can't go out with your friends, or, well, some do, but I mean, we're talking about subtle. forms of abuse. They're not going to say you can't go out with your friends, or you know, of course I want you to spend time with your sisters or your siblings or whatever. But it's the degrading things like, oh, are you talking to your sister again? Or putting down the friends. Oh, you want to do that? Well, I just, you know, she's always negative, or he's always,
Right.
you know, whatever. And so then what happens is it kind of induces this guilt or questioning in the person. Well, maybe she is like that. Maybe I do spend too much time with them. It's those subtle things that eventually, or they play the guilt trip. They pout. Well, oh, of course you can go out tonight, and then you're going out and they're giving you the silent treatment or whatever, or they're moping around the house,
Yeah.
and sending
Yeah.
these sort of subtle signals that say you really should be at home with me. And if you're an empath, if you're a sensitive person, if you're a caring, loving person, you care about the relationship, you're investing in the relationship. So here you're thinking, oh, well, I've got to invest in the relationship again. This isn't about my needs. This is about their needs. Well, you know, maybe I won't go out tonight. And then eventually you find yourself, you don't have. So now, not only are you not getting your needs met from the spouse or partner or person in your relationship that you're in a relationship with, you don't have the ability to go out with other people and get those needs met either. So now you're isolated.
It's so true. And before you know it, you can be trapped in a situation that becomes very unpleasant. Then it becomes controlling. And I do say to singles, you know, be very careful to really live a full life, and to do that while you're in a dating situation. You know, have enough strength of personhood and be so established in your personhood that you realize, number one person cannot fulfill all of your needs, as you said. And that is the picture of marriage these days. It's the ring on the finger. It's the, you know, the meal at the end of the day, and the romantic hours that follow, and take care of the kids, and, you know, keep up with the Joneses. I mean, it's almost ridiculous what we expect of one another. All of this, some women, even men, will go to an altar believing that this one person can do all of this for them, because of our now extended lifespan, you know, 60 years.
Right.
That's a big toll to put on someone. So it's very healthy to have other friendships, other sources of encouragement and upbuilding and interests that are part of our life. And I you know, I would suggest if you see the inklings of that, I don't want you to do that, or that's stupid and you shouldn't. Red flag, you know.
Yeah,
watch out for that.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely red flag. I think also hitting on something that I think this goes for every relationship. When you are feeling bad, when you are relating to someone out of fear, the fear of abandonment, the fear of loss, you're relating to them out of guilt. Well, I really want to do this, but I know they want me to stay home and I feel so guilty. Or you go out with your friends and the whole time you're out, you're feeling guilty about being out and leaving that other person at home. Those things begin to whittle away at your emotional well-being, your self-worth, your enjoyment.
Yeah.
And so I think listening to your feelings is also, and validating your feelings, because we get caught in this trap of it's not about me, it's about the other person. And man, if you were you know, like you're a pastor, I've been a pastor. I don't think I've ever been to a marriage conference that wasn't, that this didn't get said at some point. You know, life is not about being happy.
Right.
Marriage is not about being happy. It's about self-sacrifice, and it's about laying your life down. And I know you got some great stuff on that. You know,
the whole concept of love needs to be revisited, I think. If you in any shape or form have had a bad experience of love, or have had an unwholesome experience of love, especially as a child, you know, you can quickly find yourself looking for love in all the wrong places. And I think it's not even about trying to experience love. It's even just, what is love? What actually is love? There's so many different messages on what love is. We all have our, you know, for some people it's the chick flick, experience. That's love. For others, it's like laying down your life to the point where you don't have one anymore, and a loyalty that's more like a loyalty binding contract to a controlling person, and we call that love. The extremes and everything in between probably need a whole fresh look. What I've been thinking, I was thinking about my whole experience and what I've walked through in the last 30 or so years, and I actually just chose to let unconditional love embrace me. And
Yeah.
to have a relationship with unconditional love. It wasn't like I wanted to. I was tired of waiting for someone to tell me that that's what love was and that's what I could do, or that was okay. I just decided, this is the relationship. I'm going to have unconditional love for myself. And I hope that unconditional love will be extended through me because I give it to myself and I receive it, from a higher force, higher
Right.
self, a God source, etc. Is that's the first time I've actually said that out loud, but I had to make a decision because even things that I was reading and gleaning from religious systems, etc., were not showing me that it was okay for me to experience unconditional love.
Right.
That's kind of crazy to make that statement out loud, but
I hear you. I understand. But I think we have to use the term in our language, unconditional love, because in reality, what we know of as love is a conditioning mechanism.
yeah,
That we use love to, and this is, I think, where people get so confused. Love has been used, and maybe love isn't the right term. Maybe it's affection, or maybe it's attention, or maybe it's compliments, or the withholding of that is used even to train your children. So
it's so true.
it's used as a conditioning mechanism. It's an emotional, social conditioning mechanism. That's what love is for most people. So
Mm-hmm.
as long as you're this way, I'm going to love you. As long as you do this, I'm going to love you. But if you do something else that displeases me, I'm going to withdraw and pull back my love. And so that kind of emotional conditioning causes a person to form this false identity to where now they don't feel emotionally connected. You want to talk about emotional unavailability? We can become so conditioned by love. You understand what I'm
Yes,
saying?
I do. Yep.
That we create a false self to try to get love that then we're completely emotionally disconnected from.
Yep.
And so we don't feel connected with the relationship because we don't feel connected with ourselves. So what happens then is, with affairs, somebody comes along and loves us and we feel like we can be ourselves, and then you're coming alive again. But you're coming alive again because your emotions are coming alive again, because especially in the initial stages of a lot of those relationships, there's no conditioning, there's no expectation. It's not about you being the person I want you to be, or you being the person that I married. You're not the person I married anymore. You're not the person you were. I became conditioned in this relationship to be someone that I wasn't. And so I think one of the huge keys, if there's couples out there that are listening, one of the huge keys is you have to give the other person the permission to fully and totally and authentically be themselves, even when it causes you discomfort.
Yeah. Oh, so good. I'm so glad that you shared all that. I mean, we have to learn to love ourselves, don't we? I mean, you'll so often you hear, you make me happy. And then when the person does something, there's another condition. When the person does something that does not make me happy, all of a sudden my freedom, the joy that I had yesterday is now connected to whether this person does this thing or doesn't do that thing. And I really believe that true freedom is when you're not relying on anything to behave a certain way for for me to be happy, that I can generate my own sense of joy and happiness and peace and love, even by myself or with myself. and then what you do won't affect, and I'm able to love you freely as well. What do you think about that? I mean, that's a pretty hard thing to begin to attain to do if been you've lived most of your life expecting other people to change. I mean, isn't that what we're seeing all over you have to do this, then I'll be okay. You behave this way, then I'll be happy. You know?
Yeah, I think the underlying message there, it's subtle. It's built into the conversation like a presupposition. If I need you or someone else in my life to act a certain way so that I can feel okay, that is telling that I don't already feel okay the way that I am. And that's really the root issue. So if we can get to where we can feel okay and be okay with ourselves
Yeah.
first, then we're not depending or looking for something outside of ourselves to make us feel okay. And so
Right.
now you're peeling back layers of shame from probably childhood messages that you received probably your entire life, where and hey, I mean, as a parent, there's times I get completely ex- exasperated with my children who won't cooperate with me, right? Especially my strong-willed ones. And you do start sending the message you're not okay the way you are, and so it's a real challenge as a parent to raise a child in a way that they can function in society
Right. I
without
know.
sending the message you're not okay the way you are, and totally killing their spontaneity. So
Yeah.
um
It's challenging. It really is challenging. And I've been thinking about this so much. I've raised my three boys. I have two grandchildren. And my goodness, so many apologies I've offered to them for all of the mistakes. There's so many mistakes. You know, uh, Not realizing that in thinking I was guiding them right, I was really presenting a lot of conditions, et cetera, et cetera. And I think any parent looks back and sees all the ways that they could have done better, for sure. But what is the number one thing then? And one other thought that I had was, then what is the difference between that healthy non-attachment to somebody, being able to love them because I'm going to find my own, I'm going to connect with my own source of happiness, my own source of joy and love, and being emotionally unavailable. What's the subtle fine line between those two, and how do you tell the difference? And then I have one more thought that I don't know if we'll have time in this
yeah,
program.
sure. Yeah, so I think and I wish I had, definitely don't have the answer to that. I'm sure there's psychologists or somebody somewhere that's figured this all out. But I think on a practical level, it's a commitment to authenticity in the moment. I think one of the mistakes that we make is we don't see ourselves um, as fluid. And here's what I mean by that. If you're growing, if you're alive, you are never the same person. So there are times that you can be angry and times that you can be happy. When you're happy, you're a totally different person than you are when you're angry. And we
Yeah.
like to talk about our character. We like to talk about our personalities. We like to talk about ourselves in these very fixed ways. Well, that's not the kind of person I am, that kind of stuff, without understanding that life is a process. And I can't remember if it was a monk or a saint or somebody said, you don't step into the same river twice because the water's moving, so it's always different. It's always changing. And life is like that river. So I think we do need attachment. We do need love. We do need affirmation. We do have areas. Nobody's perfect in this. Nobody loves himself perfectly or unconditionally.
Right.
Everybody gets cranky. Everybody has a bad day. Everybody can, do stuff and think, wow, that was really, that wasn't me to do that. But it was you in that moment.
Yes.
It
Yes.
absolutely was you. And so I think to be able to be authentic in the moment and express yourself in that moment um, is a big step towards healthy attachment. So I need some affection tonight. I need some attention tonight. I need you to leave me alone. I need some space. Uh, to be able to express those kinds of things and have the freedom to express those things. I think another sort of toxic thing is if we feel like we have to be the perfect person for that other person. Because what you end up doing, we can talk about the controlling relationship. Well, the person is giving me the silent treatment. The person is using some form of manipulation or control to get me to conform to their will. But the problem is when you start conforming to keep the peace, you're being just as controlling because you're making your decision to control that person's response. And I understand this doesn't apply if you're in an really abusive relationship where your safety is really at stake. Then you need to keep that up until you can figure out a good plan, hopefully with a professional, to get out of that situation. But a lot of people are not in dangerous relationships. They're just in these relationships that are unfulfilling. And so what can happen is if you're worried about that person pouting, or you're worried about that person, damaging the relationship, and so you're conforming in that moment, not being authentic because you want to control their response, you're actually, both of you are operating from this system of control. And so there's not this freedom in the relationship. It's just one big power struggle.
Oh my gosh. I mean, talk about, you just nailed it. I mean, the authenticity issue is so big. And, it gets eroded through so many things over the years, doesn't it? I mean, to the point where you don't even really know who you are. You are, but it's like we leave pieces of ourselves, or what I call prostituting our souls, through one thing after another after another. I think toxic relationships, one of the things you kind of were saying it, I call it the payoff.
Yeah.
We prostitute ourselves to our souls, to things. I know that's a heavy word, prostitute, but it's appropriate, because in giving part of our soul away or not being authentic to ourselves, we do that because there's a payoff attached to it, right? It could be as simple as a roof over our head. It could be not being lonely. It could be to have someone on our arm. We see this a lot, but the bottom line is this really your authentic self showing up in this relationship? And what are you going to do about that? And where did you lose yourself along the way? There's a song that you're probably familiar with. The lyrics are amazing. When I thought I'd lost me, you knew where I left me. It's us that have left ourselves, abandoned ourselves somewhere along the way. And that is such a huge component, I think, to toxic relationships and the repeat of toxic relationships. So until we stop, sit, spend some time in solitude, willing to look at our pain, look at the roots of why we are where we are, we usually will find that somewhere along the way we abandoned ourselves or parts of ourselves.
Yeah, we betrayed ourselves, huh?
Yeah.
That's so powerful there when you're talking about, and it's another one of these really nuanced things, because there's this idea that floats around out there that if you do something nice for someone else, if you're serving other people, and you're getting a payoff from it, then it's selfish. People are just so afraid, I think, of being selfish. But truth be told, there should be, I like to think in terms of mutually beneficial relationships. There are those payoffs, but there are healthy payoffs, and then there are unhealthy payoffs. But what keeps us in the unhealthy relationship is the payoff that we get for being in the unhealthy relationship. Things like what you mentioned. If you're not as financially empowered so that you can't be out on your own. I know a lot of people in that situation, they would be better off, the kids would be better off, everybody would be better off if they were not in that relationship, because it's become so toxic and they're not able to work it out or not willing to work it out, and that's fine, whatever. But they can't because they don't have that financial independence, so they stay in this relationship for the secondary benefit of a roof over their head. What do you think, if you have any ideas, I'm curious, what are some of the emotional secondary benefits or payoffs that keep a person in a toxic relationship system? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sex.
Okay,
just the raw primal element of
I love it. Yeah.
especially if you if sex to you is not an emotional connection, the relationship itself is unfulfilling,
Hmm.
but this primal drive, if someone's got a very strong primal drive to, for that,
Yeah.
they'll stay for that reason. I think loneliness is huge. I don't want to be alone. The fear that's attached to loneliness for a lot of people is huge, especially if you are more the extrovert type, where you get your upbuilding, your sense of building, charging your battery from being with someone.
Right.
you know all of
Right.
a sudden, you see this often with perhaps someone that divorced later in life, and then they're married again, it was less than a year later, because it was so difficult to face that empty house, um, but only to find same routine years later. I think loneliness is one of them, of course, financially, that kind of thing. But you're saying emotional things, just someone to sit with, the companion, the someone to moan to,
Right.
someone to carry out your habits, your emotional habits, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. If we're stuck in emotional habits, and someone is attached to those habits, it's like parasitic type of relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you have to have someone there to exercise those habits, and you let go of that familiarity. Don't we hate to let go of things sometimes for the sheer fact that it's familiar, and we feel like we're stripped bare if we let go of familiarity and step into the unknown. There's just so many different possibilities.
Yeah. So what are some of the fears that people might face in letting go of that familiarity? Like, what are some of those fears? What are some of those horror movies or whatever that runs through a person's mind that keeps them unhappy? They know they're unhappy this way, but they're not ready or willing to take the risk to try something different because of a fear. What do you think are some of those fears that keep people bound?
Well, I think the root of the fear, or the foundation, the shaky, it is exactly that. It's the shaky foundation, the unbuilt foundation within ourselves,
Mm,
that we can actually do life alone, that we're
talk,
actually capable of being in this world alone. And I think that has a huge connection to safety issues, a sense of safety. Um, one of the biggest elements of a toxic relationship is a lack of safety. So people think intimacy is sex, and of course it's not. It's truth.
mm,
It's two people being able to be completely naked and unashamed, no shame between them, even in their worst day, and still accept one another. It doesn't mean to say that's for the long haul for the rest of their life, but acceptance and the safety that brings is the groundwork for intimacy. So I think when we don't even know how to live in our own body,
mm.
intimately acquainted with ourselves, because we lost ourselves along the way, that foundation has to be established first, that we are going to feel safe in our own body on this earth. And I've heard you talking about that. I mean, the escapism that's actually available to us is like rampant right now. We have so many ways to escape actually arriving and being here and putting our feet on the ground, and facing things, trusting that we have the capability built within us to overcome things one step at a time, one day at a time. But if you've gone your whole life and you don't even know yourself, and you've certainly not learned to trust yourself, or you've actually been taught not to trust yourself,
Yeah.
that's
Right.
huge, and that needs attention right there, with perhaps a little bit longer. But if you've actually been taught to not trust yourself, what do you have? No wonder you're going to be terrified of going outside of this relationship that became your identity, even if it was toxic. So we don't want to let go of familiar things, even if they're toxic, because we will fear that we will literally have nothing. And I see all the time, and I've experienced it myself, what I call sort of holding together an illusion of substance, and all it was ash, just ashes stuck together for an illusion of substance, knowing that any minute one more blow of an adverse wind and the whole thing was going to come down. The whole pack of cards was going to blow down, but holding it together anyway, because at least it was something, you know.
Yeah.
And we have to be willing to let it go, and that is a very understandably scary thing to do. But what I see happens is when people let it, the toxic ashes go, is their first chance to get reintroduced to themselves. You know, I had no idea how strong I was until I had to be that strong, right? Something like that, the saying goes. But because everything else is in the way, when you let it all go, you suddenly get introduced to yourself. And as long as we won't medicate, as long as we're willing to just sit with it, it's amazing how quickly we realize, wow, I have the ability to step away from this toxic situation and stand on my own feet and rediscover my own worth and rediscover my own capability. And if we'll just give ourselves space to do that, which is the hardest part, it comes quick. I think it comes sooner than we would expect.
Wow, that is so powerful. I mean, that's so powerful. So I was going to follow up with the question, what is the foundation of a healthy sense of self? What does that look like? But I think you described it pretty well.
A healthy sense of self. I mean, it's worth, isn't it? I think I've been saying this lately, and I do think it needs some time, but you know, it's a statement that we throw around willy-nilly these days. You're so valuable. You're valuable, honey. You know, you're worth it. I really think people are ready to know why. I don't think it's going to be enough, especially if you've got a cognitive dissonance issue going on that's pretty hefty within yourself, that subconsciously you've been programmed to believe that you are a piece of trash, or that you are not enough, not good enough, all of the unlovable, all of those things. To be told in our head, you're valuable, you're worthy, I'm not sure it's hitting home with a lot of people. So I think we need to really visit, how do we become reestablished or established in our inherent worth? And I believe by the fact of our existence, we are worthy.
Yeah. And I think
incredibly valuable and worthy by the sheer fact that you are here as a body, soul. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I think embracing your uniqueness as well.
Oh yeah.
You know, I've known people in relationships where they wouldn't enjoy the food that they normally would want to enjoy because their partner didn't like it, or they would, you know, I knew one person totally terrified of heights and not really adventurous, and the spouse was really adventurous and always, you know, so she would end up doing all these things and just be terrified and vomiting just because the husband had to have companionship and couldn't do it on his own, you know?
Yes.
It's crazy. And so some of it is really as simple as, hey, I really have, like, for me, I have kind of some eccentric food tastes. Like, I'm one of those people that likes spicy chocolate, you know, like I want to take chili and blend it with dark chocolate and you know, and I enjoy that about myself. And so just being able to find some things that maybe are unique about you, enjoying what you enjoy visually or taste wise, or and having the freedom to embrace that and say, you know what, that's pretty cool about me. It may not be like everybody else, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So in terms of relationship, it doesn't mean someone doesn't love you if they're not willing to be dragged into your thing, right? Your unique
Right, exactly.
thing. Yeah, I totally agree with you on the uniqueness. I mean, each one of us is so incredibly beautiful, wonderful in our uniqueness. And, you know, we know that diversity is a gift. It's a gift to us. It creates the opportunity for expansion. If we were all the same and there was no diversity, we would be robots. It would be pointless. The whole point is that we are so unique and diverse, and learning to love one another in that way. But it first takes, it's very difficult to love somebody else for their uniqueness if you haven't first learned to love yourself for your uniqueness, your idiosyncrasies, your weirdness, your beauty, your imperfection, all of these things. So, we're so programmed in a world where, I mean, at the age of, gosh, what was it? I'm 11 years old. I can remember, having pin-up pictures of Vogue magazine models, right, all over my wall. This was my goal, to be that thin, always. And, to the point where I didn't realize it was just the toxicity of that I set myself a standard. And I was in an environment, gymnastics, into national level gymnastics and entertainment dance. I was a dancer. So I was in an environment that completely enforced that. I watched a classmate at the performing arts school the college that I went to, have a chair thrown at her because she was, overweight, darling. I mean, all the things that we do to ourselves that, or that we allow or get programmed to believe are okay, are just eroding our beautiful organic sense of value that we could have for ourselves. There's a lot we have to do a lot of taking away. I think that's the beauty of when you get a little older, you realize you're not trying to become more or add more. You just need to get rid of a whole bunch of stuff so that you can find out who you were actually to begin with,
Yeah, I love that. I mean, kind of leaves me with the thought of coming back to your organic self. I just love
Yes.
your own organic beauty and uniqueness, and again, to be organic, to grow, to allow yourself different expressions. The leaves fall off the trees in the winter. they bud in spring. They flourish in summer. And so conditions affect us and we change with those conditions. And just because you don't have leaves or fruit right now doesn't mean that you're not perfect the way you are. My tree that's not bearing fruit in winter is perfect the way it is, not bearing fruit in the winter. And if we could learn to accept those things about ourselves and accept those perfections about ourselves, and I'm using perfection in the truest sense of the word,
Right.
the perfection of your uniqueness, not the perfection of being compared to a pinup model or what a man is supposed to be, but finding out what is like. So this is so cool because what you're saying is that we get this journey back to ourselves. We get this journey back to self-discovery, and the opportunity then to express that and in sort of a way reinvent ourselves. So if you're in a healthy relationship with a lifelong partner, then they are doing the same thing, and they are giving you the freedom to do those things. They're giving you the freedom to not bear fruit in winter and be abundantly fruitful in summer or at harvest time or whatever. And so there's this delicate sort of balance or dance in a healthy relationship. But I think that's how we could identify: am I in a relationship that's toxic that I need to get out of? Am I in a relationship that needs some work and some tweaking? Or am I in a relationship that's actually genuinely healthy? And I think it comes back to that organic self. Is your organic self honored and appreciated in the context of your relationships, or is it being killed, frankly, in the context of your current relationships?
That's so well said. I absolutely, and I love you. I love that you use the word honored. I would choose that word too. That self honor, but we cannot wait for somebody else to do that for us, right? We have to honor ourselves first. If someone joins in that process, it's an enhancement. But we cannot wait for someone to honor us first. We see that a lot, now young girls, waiting for. I mean, it's been going on for centuries, lifetimes. You know,
It's the human
you know,
experience. It's the
it's
human
the
experience.
human experience.
There's
Yeah.
probably not anybody out there listening that cannot relate to this on some level. They cannot see that this is part of the human experience. And even like what I was saying with parenting, as parents, we need to let ourselves off the hook because it's part of the experience. It's part of the stages that we go through. We come out spontaneous and free and naked and unashamed, and it's part of the plan of where we're at with humanity that you lose that at some point and then get the joy later on in life of rediscovering that.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That's so good because that way we don't fail, right? We don't have to beat
Right.
ourselves over the head with I failed. We just that is part of the human experience. It's extremely freeing when you say that because it's true. And we get to discover it ourselves all over again.
Yeah. Awesome. This has been a great conversation. Maybe the next one that we do, we can talk about religion, if or something. I mean, we'll who knows? We'll talk about it. But one of the things we want to cover in this series that I'd like to see us do is how does religion cause us to lose our soul, and how does a genuine expression of healthy healthy faith or healthy spirituality or a healthy relationship with God become a resource for us as we're going through this, and how can we apply those resources or tell or give those resources to people, so that they can apply them through this process. Talk about both sides of that at some point. I'd love to talk about all kinds of different issues with gaslighting and how gaslighting affects your self-worth. And so if you're interested in listening to these, if this has been a blessing for you, I appreciate it. If you're not a subscriber, that you might want to subscribe to the channel, might want to hit the little notification bell down there so that you know when new videos are coming out. And if you would give us some comments below, things that you took from the video or things that you would like to see Michele and I talk about as we're doing this, that would be extremely helpful. So Michele, thank you so much for spending this time with me and with the viewers out there. And it's been really enriching for me. It's been incredible.
For me also. Thanks, Aaron.
You bet. All right. Having said that, thank you for watching, and I hope wherever you are, you're doing great.